Usually I don't do commentary on gaming conferences, but considering the poor state of the gaming industry, it feels right to look for a few reasons to be more optimistic about the future. If you didn't know, every summer most of the major studios will announce their biggest upcoming projects in the tradition of the now-defunct E3 convention. With all the unprecedented price hikes across the board, alongside all the studio shutdowns, some exciting game announcements were certainly needed. And surprisingly enough, there were many bright spots. It's been a while since the summer announcement season was this diverse, in my opinion. Though I won't lie, some of these announcements also just highlight all the current problems of the industry. Of course, feel free to disagree down below or share your own hot takes in regards to those gaming summer announcements. I will be switching back and forth between the good news and the more irritating announcements that caught my eye. For me, one of the biggest reveals was Gen Atlas. If this was any other developer, it might have been just another trailer among a dozen. But coming from Fumito Ueda, this became one of my most anticipated games by default. He might not have directed too many games, but Shadow of the Colossus remains a masterpiece, and Ico was a milestone in some respects too. All of his works, if nothing else, are very unique and ambitious. Seeing over-the-shoulder shooting in his new robot game is a little unexpected, but I'll just trust the guy here. I just hope it doesn't take another 5 years of delays to come out, like The Last Guardian did back in the day. It's already been a while since the game's development was teased, so I hope it's close to the finish line. Speaking of long waiting times, seeing Cuphead alive and well is nice. However, considering that they didn't have any footage for the new hand-drawn game, I assume it's gonna take a while. At least the new spin-off looks like a decent placeholder. I mean, we aren't lacking in pixel platformers from indie studios, but when it comes to level design, the Cuphead team has proven themselves more than enough. So this is one to keep an eye on, I think. Another big one was the Resident Evil Veronica remake. I won't lie, I thought I was a bit tired of the RE engine formula after 10 years, and I simply don't believe that the entire series had to be remade in the same style. But I guess they still got me, because this teaser still had me pumped for a bit. Probably because, just judging by the intro, this will be very different from the original, and feel like a whole new mainline game, similar to the RE2 remake. The original game had multiple big mansions, so hopefully they keep the spirit of its complex level and puzzle design, but without all the not so great enemy patterns of old. As always, I still think the original should become easily available too. Right now it's only on PlayStation Network. Also, I guess I need to finally play the first Alien Isolation now that the new one is coming. I've heard many good things from long-time survival horror fans, so I appreciate this announcement, despite not being able to talk about the first game. Now there's one game I didn't think would trigger me this much, and that's the Rayman remake. Remake culture has gone out of control, and Rayman Legends Retold might break the camel's back for me. It's everything wrong with this industry, which is all the more irritating because the gameplay and art design look very decent. Here's my problem, there's no good reason why this couldn't have been a new mainline entry. Instead, it's a prime example of remakes not being chosen for a proper purpose anymore, but only to squeeze money out of a familiar name. Legends Retold might just be the epitome of that. Because the original game is as timeless as it gets. It couldn't control any more smoothly or look and sound any better. In fact, those hand-drawn environments absolutely look more impressive than the 3D graphics in Retold. Again, that wouldn't have been a problem if this was a new Rayman. But trying to revive this still easily available and unique classic with a more generic Unreal Engine aesthetic just to desperately reignite some sort of FOMO, to me that feels like the industry is reaching peak anti-art. But that isn't all. Despite being maybe the most redundant remake ever, they couldn't even add online co-op as a new selling point. Yet at the same time there seems to be some sort of online DRM. I'm not sure what's worse just from a concept level, Rayman Retold or the remake of a Star Fox remake. It's funny, in both cases we're being sold story cutscenes as a big new thing. I guess we can't have gameplay focused games anymore either. As a contrast, the new Tomb Raider reimagining seems fine, because it's the opposite. Yes, it's also a remake of a remake and therefore somewhat ridiculous. However, this one only seems to be taking the story of the first game, which wasn't that crucial, while building all new gameplay and set pieces around that. So it feels more like an actual new mainline title. Not to mention that all these interpretations of Tomb Raider 1 actually have distinct titles and don't seem to be in competition with each other. As in which version is the definitive one, because they're all so different anyway. I just hope that they keep the spirit of the old games and leave out modern handholding when solving puzzles. Besides, there was this low-key announcement of a Toy Story collection. I won't pretend that I'm a big Pixar fan, I'm not, but these are the kind of retro projects I want to see more of. Making a whole franchise easily available again, while preserving the original intent with only a few cleanups when it comes to presentation and emulation. The Final Fantasy VII remakes are a different beast altogether, pretty much a complete reimagining of the old game's story. Now there's not much to say about the final installment, FF7 Revelation. It seems to keep all the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which I won't complain about. The mixture of real-time action with manual menu commands is still a great concept for the genre, and when it comes to Ubisoft-style open worlds, Rebirth had one of the better ones in my opinion. Really, I just wish they would have made 3 new mainline games with this new engine, instead of using it for this big Final Fantasy VII fanfiction, where all the new twists rely on people being aware of the original reception of the 1997 game. One welcome surprise was that it seems that we have a small racing game comeback going on here. I never played Stuntman because back in the day the genre competition was just too big. However, these days I welcome anything we get. I wish they'd shown gameplay though, so I could be more confident about it. The new IP Clutch and the latest Hot Wheels game seem like polar opposites, where one is about quirky sandbox hijinks, where the other is about race driving drama. One of the things I'm most looking forward to here is Star Wars Galactic Racer, since I'm very keen to know whether the old developers of Burnout can still pull something off, even if I'm not too fond of those generic Unreal graphics here. Speaking of vehicular action, I could never get into the groove of free flight combat, and it feels like a shame, because the story and presentation in Ace Combat seem to hit all those ludicrous notes you'd want from over-the-top Japanese games. Despite not being for me, I'm glad Bandai Namco is still funding projects like this. However, they might just push me over the edge this time, because Ace Combat 8 apparently comes with a PS2 fan favorite, and I'm all about finding out about new classics that I missed out during those days. Then there was that new Turtles project by Platinum Games, based on that edgy comic that many people are hyping, but which I haven't read. Let's not beat around the bush, despite producing many classics, Platinum has been hit or miss lately, especially since many veterans left the company. And the first Turtles game by Platinum from about a decade ago was not well received. But I did enjoy the recent take on Ninja Gaiden 4, so I want to be optimistic here, but it's hard to judge without any gameplay. When it comes to already announced titles, Stranger Than Heaven looked pretty good once again, and like a big step up from the very unnecessary and fumbled Yakuza 3 remake. To be honest, I'm already sold. Yakuza with multiple historical settings and jazz-themed gameplay mechanics, I don't need to know much more. The new content for Onimusha was decent, and I'm sure Capcom will continue their streak of highly rated games this year. Overall though, I don't think this will beat Pragmata for me, since it feels more conventional. For one, I'm still a little perplexed, because last year they said this wouldn't be a Souls-like, and well, that was a lie. At least in the demo, the Souls influence within the encounter design and within the UI, straight up to the Estus flask and the bonfires feels closer to Souls than the more arcadey Onimusha action adventures on PS2. Also these days, the samurai demon setting isn't that mind-blowing anymore. I mean, we just had Neo 3. But the action itself looks very fine, and it seems to be doing a bit of its own thing with more careful parrying and slicing. I hope they at least try to shake up the level design later on, maybe getting closer to the Resident Evil design of the older games. On a side note, I will be getting that re-release of Onimusha 4, which I assume not many people played, as it was a very late PS2 title. I was always curious about that one, so this PSN release seems like a good opportunity, not a bad announcement. Even though we are still missing the third game with Jean Reno on modern machines. Speaking of Capcom action franchises, Monster Hunter Wilds was a big miss for me last year, because it was way too streamlined and handholdy, which is why I'm naturally not over the moon about the expansion announcement, but I might give it a try considering that the sky theme seems kind of inventive. Now for those Sony action games, despite leaning much more towards Japanese action games myself, I do enjoy the gameplay of games like the new God of War. The battles feel hefty and they are a decent translation of arcade action into the behind the shoulder view. The new spin-off looks nicely dynamic too, apparently with more agility than before. Yet it still feels hard to get excited. I guess my problem is all the things that aren't gameplay. The cinematic angle has begun to fall flat for me, mostly because of the cringe-worthy millennial writing, which is way too quippy and pretentious at the same time. I guess the new comedic sidekick might be a step up from the kid, who was just way too on the nose. On the other hand, it's kind of funny how they'd swap out an iconic character like Kratos for this random person who I had to Google at first, despite playing the other games. I don't know, at this point these games are something I'd try for a budget price only. Same goes for Wolverine. I'd personally prefer a game without all the clearly non-interactive elements during battles. Although in this case I'm also baffled that Insomniac, historically known for very colorful games, now creates comic book titles with such a drab, realistic style. Not counting the gore, I guess. Marvel Talk on Souls would be much more my jam, if only I wasn't too stupid for competitive fighting games. There still are a few announcement streams coming this June, but this is my bottom line so far. Again, feel free to share your highlights and lowlights down below. Any like or sub is also always appreciated. Either way, thanks for watching.